There you go. How's everyone doing? Welcome to BBC Spews Live. What's the date? It's the 9th of May. Huzzah! I'm finally getting used to doing the date the right way around. Or the wrong way around. Yeah, the wrong way around. What's going down? Everyone all right? Who's in the chat? Not a bad number for a Friday night, that is it. We're getting old, see. People aren't going on the lash as much. Davey's in, everyone's favourite codhead, if favourite codheads exist. Who's in? John Hunter, now then, how you doing? Ams, good evening, how are you? Trevor Harris, now then. The Angry CFC, one of my most favourite cockneys. Best Black, all right. Richie Erickson, now then. Stu, all right. And yeah, there's the prices. Yeah, not the prices, Steve, that's a fair point. I'm a little bit damp because I just did some fizz, but I'm feeling pretty good. And I finally took a day off because I've racked up so many days off. I decided to throw one in, which means I'm going on a company piss-up tonight and I can actually overindulge, which makes for a nice change. Well, not a nice change in general, just a nice change for the company, the company piss-ups. You know, most people, you've got to be quite civilised on one of them, haven't you? Or you've got, like, work the next day. I don't have to worry about that tonight, so I can, you know, get leathered and drop my drawers in front of my boss, as you do, standard. Standard in the UK. They are a lot more genteel, the Americans. I find it quite bizarre that we still maintain this stereotype that the English are all, like, civilised and posh. The Americans still think that. The Americans, there's a large amount of them that still think English people are very, like, genteel and do right sort of thing. And in actual fact, the Americans are much, much more reasonable and civilised than we are. I know that sounds like I'm dragging down my own country, but honestly, the Americans are proper nice people. Like, they have a sense of fair play about them. They remind me of English people in the stereotypes, basically. I remember seeing a fight between a British bootneck and an American one when we were all leathered in Virginia Beach. And the Americans were much more civilised than we were. You know, they'll like shake hands afterwards and they don't give you a good shoe in the second you hit the deck. They are much more pleasant, genteel people. There's many aspects of America that are really old-fashioned. David Starkey talked about this when he was buying his house out there. And it is the very prim and old-fashioned. I think it's a good thing, personally, because, you know, when you're a sort of conservative-minded person, you miss the old days, don't you? And the Americans do a lot of things old-fashioned. They still pay with checks, and they still do a lot of handshaking, and they still do a lot of signing in person. And yeah, in very many ways, they're much more old-fashioned than we are. I think that it is understandable, isn't it? Because ultimately, it's one thing that gives me hope for the continuation of England via other means, which is probably what's going to need to happen, isn't it? Until it massively kicks off. I think that the Anglosphere, like the Brits, the Aussies, the Americans, the Canadians, the Kiwis, and even Anglophile parts of the world that have a strong tie to us, places like Singapore and that, I think they'll keep on the continuation of British culture long after the EU's descended into Eurabia and they've banned all the British pubs, you know what I mean? I take great solace in that there'll be pubs called like the Dog and Duck and the Red Lion in places like Singers, long after loads of them have been bulldozed by the independents, because as we know, an independent in the UK these days, basically in the Taliban. Yeah, basically in the Taliban. Definitely not independent. Craig, thoughts on Keir Starmer giving the EU access to the UK military? Oh, I've got plenty of thoughts on that one. I almost made a video about it. Shall I look up a story of that? EU access to the military? I love that. Honestly, the people that are running the United Kingdom are absolutely mental. And then before this story, there was a story on the BBC a month ago saying, could the UK reintroduce conscription? And I was like, brilliant. Love that. Love that. Let me tell you how that's going to work, right? If our degenerate scum that lord it over us politicians move forward with this plan, let me tell you how that's going to work, right? The evil, scheming, devious Jerrys and the frogs will everybody knows, will basically make it so you've got French French generals commanding Eastern European and, if they get their way, British soldiers to go over the top. You know, like General Melchett on Blackadder Goes Forth, where it's just, casually scooping, 100,000 dead men off the board with a dustpan and brush. Jolly good, jolly good. Sacrifice 100,000 men's lives casually to try and move the Field Marshal's drinks cabinet 2 feet closer to Berlin, as the term he uses. Yeah, they did. Yeah. Yes, Richie, they did. Yeah, basically. What's going to happen is you're going to end up with, because the EU, when they close ranks and they look after themselves, the whole project was to benefit the Germans and the frogs. You're going to end up with a French general having 1,000 privates from Poland and Yorkshire, right, going, have at them, men, and then they're going to be marching into the gunfire while the Frenchmen and the Jerry are drinking fine wine and watching from the bunker. That's what's going to happen if they start using other countries' soldiers under a unified command in the military. It's blatantly obvious. Blatantly obvious. Going to be almost like the opposite of what happened in World War II, because, the Americans are, related to us and they actually like us. Because here's a controversial thing a lot of Brits don't know, or they don't like to talk about because it's true, right? Having been to Arnhem and all of the big battlefield scenes in Europe, I went to all the famous places, Pegasus Bridge, the Pointe de Hoc, Sword, Juno, all the big beaches. Basically, because the Americans knew that the Brits had been in it from the get-go and were baggage because they'd been scrapping for years, they did give us the easiest beaches. Is that common knowledge? Juno, nothing was as bad as Omaha. They knew which of the 5 primary beachheads were the most heavily defended, and the Americans took them. And that might hurt the pride of an Englishman like me, but it is a fact. As I said, deep down, certainly back then, maybe less so now, the Americans have a deep-rooted care for the British. They do, because we spawned the country. It's easy to be cynical about politics, but you can just see, because everyone says, the special relationship doesn't exist, the Americans look after themselves. I mean, yeah, they do look after themselves. Every country looks after themselves. But they're nowhere near as belligerent as they could be. Do you know what I mean? You've got to look after yourself in international politics. Yes, the Americans look after themselves. They did a Lend-Lease program that benefited themselves. You do have to look after yourselves in international diplomacy. But the Americans like their relatives. And anyone who's ever been on holiday in America knows this to be true, don't they? When you walk around America and you meet Americans, they're Anglophiles. It's why it's so easy to fall in love with the States when you move here, because 89, 95% base. It's obviously not everyone, but the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans, as soon as you meet them, they're nice to you. Straight away, they're like, where are you from? My great-granddad's from Ireland, or my great-uncle's from Scotland or England, or even just Western Europe in general. The Americans are nice to us. They like us because we're related. And that's just a fact. So that's what happened in the big one. They took the hard points, and obviously they felt the full weight of the machine guns. And if we get into an alliance with the French and the Germans, this is the mental thing about the people that are running the show these days. They're absolute lunatics. This microphone's doing my head in, by the way. It's blasting my own voice into my head. It's so obvious that they're going to look after themselves. The frogs, we had 100-year war with the French. Think of that. The minor scuffles we had with the American colonists was basically a civil war between other English people, and that's why they used to shake hands at the end of the big brawls. Cornwallis and his men just shake hands and walk off. We had 100-year war with the frogs. The frogs have never been our pals. The frogs were selling the RGs, the Exocets that they used to give Simon Weston a crispy bacon face. Right, if the frogs and the Germans have the opportunity to drive our men into the enemy guns, they will do. They are not our friends. The EU is overtly hostile to us. Think of it. What have they done since we left the EU? Have they been fair and reasonable, or have they been unbelievably dogmatically dead set against us? The French and the Germans are arseholes. What are you talking about? I mean, again, in this day and age, they're certainly further up the ladder than half the rest of the world. But don't tell me that they won't take relish in throwing... Yeah, it'll be like you've seen the South Park movie, Operation Hide Behind the Darkies. That's what they'll do with an English and an Eastern European army. If Frenchmen and Germans are running it. And it won't even be the French, it'll be the Germans, won't it? The EU's ran by the Germans. Ursula's a German. All the top boys are Germans. The humorless Teutonic twats can't bring themselves to not be in charge of everything. Klaus is a German. They must fix the problems. I told you, it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. Even when you get into philosophy, I try not to dip my toe into it too often because it does me head in, and it seems like if you get too into it, you become a pretentious twat and you start using words like hostile pontificus affluensis. No, sorry, that was the fossil, isn't it? They start using all these needlessly lengthy terms, which a good teacher told me in secondary school, if you should try and make points as simplistic as possible. I was talking about that the other day. Have you noticed how Sargon, again, I'm a big fan of Sargon. It sounds like I'm slagging him off a lot now. Sounds like I'm having a pop, but obviously I love the bloke. He got me into YouTube. But I've noticed since he's got his philosophy degree, now he's always using needlessly lengthy terms to sort of make sense of the world. And obviously 90% of the audience don't want to hear it. Netty Gaming said, do you reckon law will come back to reform, or will keep reform on the straight and narrow from the outside, or is Farage playing 4D chess? Well, that's a good one. The issue with... I'll tell you what, I just wanted to get to these super chats to keep popping up. Bad Manting, cheers, mate. Just give me £2, much appreciated. And Trevor Harris gifted a Bootneck membership. God bless him. Snap it up quick, you lucky devils. I'm going to do these two in order because I'm in the middle of a point there, Nettie, and I don't want to lose myself in midstream. It's a cultural difference between us as a people. The Irishman and the Englishman, when we see a drunk collapsed on the floor, covered in spew and piss, we see that and go, that's a bit of a shame. He shouldn't be living his life like that. But you know what? Because we have that sort of Lockean perspective, he's free to do it. We should discourage it gently, but it's not my place to tell him he has to pick himself up and get a job. The Germans, the Kantists, the Jerrys, their philosophy is all about control, bringing about control and order. When they see a drunk unconscious outside a bus station at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, they don't go, he has made the choice. They go, we must fix it. We must impose the rules to fix the problem. That's the way they are. There's something different about their culture. And that's why they are obsessed with power. We don't want it. I've never wanted it. Never been ambitious at work. A lot of people are like, why don't you apply for the next promotion? I was like, I've never desired power. I desire freedom. I want people to enjoy their lives. Life's too short. I'd rather have less money and do less work. I'd rather have less responsibility and not have to drive people all the time. I'd rather be a happy-go-lucky, easy living supervisor that can have a gentle touch rather than go, this is the plan and we must stick to the plan. That's what the Jerrys love doing. And that's that fundamental disagreement between us. So if we get involved in any project like this, we're shagged. because that's what will happen. Our natural inclination lends itself towards freedom, allowing people freedom of choice. Even our military. Anyone who served knows this to be true. British military's chilled out by comparison. Even the Americans are still, because they're more old-fashioned, still a lot more yes sir, no sir than we are. In the Royal Marines, there's no rank until Sergeant Major. Everyone's caused by the first name or a nickname. Even stripies and colour sergeants, you don't call them Sergeant, you call them Davy or Yozza or Dodsey or whatever his nickname is. And the Americans aren't like that. And the Germans are German. So it's all line, straight, this, oh my God, there is a wayward pube on your uniform, you dog. It's the way they are. So if we get involved with them, obviously it's going to knacker us, isn't it? Because we're going to be like chilled and they're going to be like, oh, we will be in charge, we'll run this operation. And then they're going to go, get the 2,000 Tommies and throw them at the strongest part in the line. We will keep the Germans back. They can't not be doing that equation in their head. Think about it. It's just in them. It's definitely part of their psyche. So that's what'll happen. And call me cynical, but you can't have a military that works like the EU will. How many times people like us have been saying this since the very beginning? You can't have it. But it's why it's linked to this global woke sociopath, entire world beige, hyper controlling shit. Because it drips through every fibre of their being. Like they want control. And this is why their whole outlook about how you can just choose anything. You want to be a woman, you are one. Done. You want to be a man, you are one. Done. You want to say that you're a panda? Done. And they think they can just go, you want the whole EU to be one country? Done. It is. It is. And Italians and Germans and frogs and purists, they'll cling to their stupid, backwards, outdated, patriotic beliefs. Oh God, it's so vile, Hans. Why can't they see forward thinkers like us? Hans and Francois, we're all the same, you and I. We're part of the team, one dream, yeah, marvellous. That's the way they live. And they're trying to delude themselves into believing that you can just do away with borders, and because of their sheer force of will and brainwashing, the Frenchman and the German and the Italian will be as close as brothers, and they'll never ever question any of their ideas, and nationality is going to disappear. And the Italian and the Frenchman and the German will be as unified behind a European flag as they ever would be behind the French and the German and the Italian flag. And it's absolute total bollocks to normal working class people who love hearth and home more than anything. It's self-evidently true. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter how much they want it to be true. It can't be. Just as it doesn't matter how much you want to believe that your 7-inch whacker is actually a nice, neat minge. It isn't. And you're not a woman, because you've got a big hairy fucking back and big wiry pubes, and you're just not. This is it's so weird to me how it's like a global movement by these sociopaths that want control and read The Guardian. They agree on everything all the time, and they always seem to think that everything's liquid and fluid and you can just decide whatever you want. Do you know what I'm saying? Isn't it weird how it's all linked? Like, that's why they all agree on, like, nationality. They think it's stupid. They think if they just repeat the mantra enough, an Irishman and an Englishman and a Frenchman and an Italian, they'll be as European and as happy to fight under a German general and under an EU flag as they would ever be fighting under their own. And they just wouldn't. And it's self-evident to normal people, to some ways and not anywheres. As I've said many times, you can see how this is true because every day I miss home. And I almost get angry at myself for doing so, but I'm a human and I'm normal. I'm not a sociopath. So I know why. I know why a man isn't a woman and a woman isn't a man and an Italian isn't Italian and he wants to, eat spaghetti and chase women, and why Frenchmen want to commit adultery and why German want to control everything all the time. The humorless, Teutonic twats. Because there's something in us from the days we flop out of our mother's wombs. You know what I mean? I was born and raised in Middlesbrough, so I live in paradise, in probably the nicest part of the nicest state of the nicest country in the Western world. And I have an easy life and a fantastic job. And every day I miss being in Borough. Like, think of that. Think of that. That's how irrational and illogical humans are. And people like us and conservative-minded people, we embrace it and we realise that we can't have total control over our emotions and our desires and our feelings. And it's a fundamental difference between us and them, because they do think that. They think by the power of their own mind, they can just decide anything and they will make it so. And it's delusional. As I've said, these sort of hyper-rational, sort of hyper-uber philosophical, rational, globalist wokists, not only does this permeate every single thing they think, it even proves itself wrong, because the fact that we're an evolved primate and we aren't totally logical, and I do miss, despite the fact I've got 3 times the salary, and I live in a paradise with amazing weather, I miss being a bin man in York because that's where I'm from, and it permeates every fibre of your being. And this is why we're cynical. When a man who calls himself a son of the soils of Pakistan starts telling Hamish McTatty from 80 generations of chavs in a council estate in Glasgow, he's more Scottish than Hamish is. It's so obvious. It's so obvious to anybody who's not a maniac. But they're like, no, this is how it works. Yeah, it is, yeah. Have you ever been? I'm sorry. Have you ever been to anywhere nice in California? You know, like how white London's nice. Like, if you, me and my wife joke about this all the time. When we go to London, we go to white London. We find the poshest areas with the nice leafy pubs with flowers all over them, and everyone is middle class, and it's brilliant. And there's no dirt, and there's no filth, and there's no foreigners, and it's perfect. The people who slag off California have been to poor London, and they're going to poor California. When you go to a town like Santa Barbara, which is the closest big city to me, it's paradise. Everyone there's well-to-do and posh. They don't have homeless people. Santa Barbara, I've maybe seen 2 homeless people in all the time I've been there, and both of them were better dressed than I am. Santa Barbara's the only place where the homeless people look down on me. They go, oh, I say, he's not well dressed for a day out in Santa Barbara. Right, it's amazing. Everything about it's paradise. The weather, the palm trees, the food, everything. So yeah, it is. It is. The only tramp in the town dresses like he's going to a dinner party, and he has a laminated sign saying, could I perchance bother you momentarily in order to take some fiscal currency due to my ineptitude or something. Right? It's ludicrous. It's a lovely place to live. And I miss being a bin man in York. That was my first job when I left the Corps. And I miss that. Because what can I do? I'm stuck with it. Because I'm a person. So anyway, that was a long 25 minutes answering that question. But yeah, worst idea ever. Every military has to be under control of their own people. Call me a cynic It has to be that way. You need Italian generals for Italian soldiers. You need cowardly French generals for cowardly French soldiers. Yeah. You need lecherous, adulterous, skirt-chasing sex pests to be in charge of lecherous, adulterous, skirt-chasing sex pests, yeah, on the continent. And you need British generals in charge of British soldiers. That's just the way of it. The idea that we will ever put English, young, fighting Englishmen under a frog should be as abhorrent to you as an old man wanking on the back of the school bus. Okay? That's my answer to that question. On to the second one, Nettie. Do you reckon Law will come back to reform or keep reform on the straight and narrow from the outside? See, this is a hard one. But as I've told you before, Farage is a smooth political operator, and he's been proved right, and by extension I've been proved right by the polls. And as I've told you, it's kind of annoying to see Carl changing his mind and apparently going all in on reform now, because he's changed his tune, hasn't he? Have you seen the last 2 weeks? Carl's been all like, oh yeah, he's all back on reform bus now, isn't he? It's you've just got to get behind him. I think it's audience capture. I think he was getting a lot of clicks on his videos because it delights the online right, which is the majority of YouTube. Slagging off Farage. But as I've told you, I honestly don't think Farage thinks badly of Tommy Robinson. I don't. I think he's a smooth political operator, and he knows the normies have been brainwashed to think he's a, one bollocked Austrian painter. They definitely have. My brother, who I get on sound with and we agree on politics, a few years ago, before he got red-pilled, he was like, oh yeah, Tony Romo's our total scum, he's scum. Likes him now. But back in the day, he thought he was, because he must know that the normies are low-information voters. And I don't wish to sound in any way arrogant, because I'm basically bigging up the audience. Bigging up, I hate that term. Got to stop using words like that. It's basically me praising my own audience because, again, I don't disagree. That's what makes him a smooth politician. You got to be a rat to be a good politician. Got to be a rat to be a politician. CFC. That's the only way. That's the only way you win. So what I'm saying is, he knows that the normies are low information. The normies. The normal conservative voters, the normal right-wing leaning people, they think Tony Romo is a fascist. They think whoever the BBC points them at is a racist, sexist, homophobe, and they'll never win. So this is what I'm saying. You have to get behind it. Even though Farage is clearly a weasel because he's a smooth political operator, he knew, and he was right. He was right. If he'd have backed Tony Romo, they'd have got twatted in the elections because the normies think he's scum. He isn't. He definitely isn't. But there's only like 10% of the voting public get all the politics off YouTube like we do and actually check out alternative media like Joe Rogan and listen to Elon Musk all the time. He was right. Hey, Kate's a new member. Welcome to the party, Kate. Cheers to you. I'm drinking black coffee. I'm not even a big fan of coffee, but my missus isn't here, so obviously we've run out of milk. And if I've got no milk, I'd rather have black coffee than black tea, because black tea is just positively uncivilized at this point. You can't drink tea with milk in for 44 years and all of a sudden drink it with no milk. Weird that, innit? Anyway, that's a fact. So again, I know I disagree with a lot of my audience, but as I've said here, I'll happily argue with anyone, including all the people that watch me. He was right. You have to play. The middle ground has always dominated British politics, right? Tony Blair lied. Christ, I voted for him back in the day. Think of that. Tony Blair lied, but he played the middle ground perfectly. Keir Starmer's trying to do it now. And what did David Starkey say that was correct? They're revolutionaries. Tony Blair was a revolutionary who masqueraded as a centrist, and it worked perfectly. And he won by a massive landslide. And you lot are all sitting there going, "Oh yeah, but Farage, you can't have Farage." He knows how to win. The masses think Tony Romo is evil. We don't, because we pay attention. But you can't worry about people like us. You've got to worry about the people who put you in power. So get behind him and hope to God that it's better than the alternative. That's all we can do. Maybe we're wrong. Find your way, band. They are career politicians. They do it because it pays well, not for the greater God. I know. Not a fan of coffee. That's it. I'm out. Well, I am drinking it as we speak. So obviously I am in a way, but I prefer tea if it's going. So yeah, you know what I'm saying? That to me, that is the end of it. And I know I've argued back and forth with tons of you. I'd go so far as to say I think about 50% of my audience doesn't like Farage and Reform. But as I've told you for ages, I'm a ruthless pragmatist. I'll take whatever gives us a shot at not descending into total civil war and civilizational collapse like something out of a Heinlein novel. And that's Farage at this point. I'm hoping, and I would think he is, because he's always been anti-immigrant. He knows the score with Tony Romo. He knows, but he's a smooth operator. So he says whatever appeals to the masses, the people who get the news off the BBC. And that's the way of it. Yeah, well, wankers do, Ron, but I don't. And as I've said, if Farage is a weasel and he's no different from Cameron and Clegg and Starmer, well then, plan B's do it the hard way. But that's the plan anyway, isn't it? If Labour, what are you going to do? Have Labour for another 10 years? I think we're going to have to do it the hard way anyway. And you're going to end up with, 300 or 400 independents forming a government. And then we'll have to do it the hard way anyway. So you've lost nothing, have you? How many times? I've said this. I told Carl this 1,000 times on Twitter. I've told Paz. I've told anyone who disagrees with me. You lose nothing by going in with Reform. Because if he is just a smooth political operator and he's playing this game, and he actually is quite right-wing, and he will enforce the borders and he will deport people, then you're in with a sliver of a chance of maybe saving your country. If he isn't, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you're just delaying the inevitable. And then the original hypothesis for how we think we're going to fix the country, the hard way, it'll be what we'll revert to anyway. So you lose nothing. You lose nothing by getting all in behind Reform. Right, regarding that one, Ragnar, I've listened to that Yusuf quite a lot, and I quite like him. Again, if he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he actually is an exceptional liar, because really he's a dogmatic adherent of the religion of peace, and the second he gets into power, he wants to, ban best bitter and staple a bin liner to all your daughters' heads. Well, again, we do what we would have done in what we've had to do in the first place, won't we? What we're definitely going to have to do if Labour and the Lib Dems and the Conservatives have the way, which is physically take the country back from the scum that stole it from us. You've lost now. And every time I ask any of you lot, no one gives me a better answer. Everyone's slagging off Reform. Nobody has told me one. And I'm putting the question up to 815 people in the chat now. Give me a better solution than Reform. Because no one else can win. No one else can win. Never going to happen. So, go balls deep in Farage. Not literally. And unite the right behind them. And if they turn out to be the same as the Tories and Labour, well, then we've lost now, have we? Because if you don't get behind Reform, the Tories and Labour and Lib Dems win anyway. So what do you lose? Anyone answer me in the chat. Someone tell me, what do you lose? What do you lose? Is he a practicing muzzer though? Might not be. You cannot, like I said, we've all met a sound bloke whose parents or grandparents were practicing and they aren't. You can't just instantly hate him just because he might be a fake, English conservative. I've been working out for a year, so I don't blow out after 5 haymakers. The only thing bullies understand is whistling when they talk because they've lost their fronts. Good, that's good, right? And this is why Bootneck advertised a bike. You need to get fit. That is why. They didn't pay shit. I didn't get any money off them. They just said you can have a free bike. I was like, go on, then. I'll have a free bike. If I agree with it, I'll sell it. I've been offered at least 20 sponsorships over the last 20 years. I haven't took any of them. It's for like all the shite that Paul Joseph Watson sells. They must just like comb YouTube for conservatives and try and offer them stuff. What I don't get is Paul Joseph Watson, if I'm getting about, what do I do? If I have a busy month, I make about $2,000, I think. If I'm a busy bastard and I make loads of videos, get about $2,000 a month. And that's with a paltry 70,000 subs. So just multiply it by like a factor of what? 20. Paul Joseph Watson must be making at least 30 or 40 grand a month. And he still sells shite. You couldn't get me to sell crushed up rhino horns or whatever the shit is he's selling with these supplement companies or trinkets you don't need. But honestly, you need some exercise. You need to do some exercise. I've told you this. You've got to have like a disciplined approach to real life now, because the time for just relaxing and doing what you liked, living totally carefree like we did in the 90s when the world was sane. In 1993, God bless, it was a magical time. Just spend all your time going to the footy and going to the clubs and drinking and chasing girls and enjoying yourself. Those times have gone. You need to stay fit, stay focused, have a plan and live in whatever way you can. Save your money, stockpile stuff that's useful, and get ready for the big kickoff, because it's definitely going to come. It's definitely going to come. I don't see how it doesn't. What do you do with that? I run a quality team at a launch site. So unlike those shiny asses who do nothing at the big corporate facilities, I work at one of the launch sites in California, near Vandenberg Space Force Base. I read a statistic yesterday that in the last 2 years, we personally have put up something like 40% of all the payloads in space. We work at a breakneck speed. It's hard work. And it's why I work far too many hours these days. In between YouTube and there, I'm probably doing about 65 hours a week of work. It's hard going. And my team does all the button-ups and does all the last-minute checks on the boosters before we fly them. I'm definitely not a rocket scientist. The interesting thing about working for them is I always get promoted. People always go, oh, you're an engineer. I was like, no, I'm not an engineer. I didn't get a college education. I went to a shocking comprehensive school in Middlesbrough, and then I joined the Royal Marines. And it went from there. The military industrial complex has always been the last option for poor working class scum, but it worked out all right. It is interesting though, isn't it? People slag off the military industrial complex, but what other choice do you have when you're from a council estate? As Elvis Costello said, the boys from the Mersey and the Thames and the Tyne have always carried the weight of the world on their shoulders. What else can you do? So yeah, my team, I run a team of, it's supposed to be 15, but I'm always recruiting. I've got 13 guys under me at the moment. And girls, got two lasses on my team. Yeah, doing all, it's a good job. I really enjoy it, like the people I work for. And as I said, that's another good thing about Elon, because you don't need to have a college degree. His company is the type that'll throw a load of work at you and responsibility, and if you step up to the plate and you're willing to put the hours in, and will knuckle down, they'll have you. He's a man who believes in the meritocracy, which is why I'm obviously a big fan. Anyway, so there's the two big stories I've been asked about. What else have I got? Any more super chats down here? No. All right, let's look at some stuff I've put on Twitter for a bit. Let's have a look. Oh, God, Lambtron's up again. I love the way that they all avoid the obvious, which is they use slippery language to try and obfuscate the fact that you're talking about war. War, what is it good for? Absolutely loads of things, apparently. People are murdering each other. And it's truly bizarre that 1 million dead young men doesn't seem to touch the sociopaths that run the world. And especially hate the fact that this fat, sweaty sack of rats, look at this picture as well, like he's looking at trying to look important. He's just a big, fat, horrible Greg's munching piece of trash, isn't he? He spent more money on sandwiches in the last 2 years than I've spent on electric bills. Just an lasting peace via the medium of death, mass death, fatty. Why don't you pick a rifle up and you go and do something about it? I hate them. Hate them. Absolute oxygen thief, David Lammy. What else did I respond to on here recently? Yeah, that annoyed me. Lefty arseholes. Does this mean we can deport anyone who tweets about our country? I was like, nobody talks like that. The middle-class Guardian readers say our country because when you use your accent, it sounds like our is our, depending on where you're from. The contempt that these left-wingers hold for normal people like you is palpable, isn't it? It's palpable. And also, unending hypocrisy. They always call you a flag shagger, and the posts are all, and the profiles are all flags. Look, absolute. Oh God, I would hate this guy. I would hate everything about him. Be a snob. Be a snob. You remember them, the real ale twats from the Viz? I always remember one of them class real ale twats comics in the Viz was where they're all there and they've all got like berets, daft glasses and stupid beards and that. And, you know, jackets with patches all over them, even though they're really far too old for that type of shit. And every pub they go to, he's always like, ooh, can I just sample just a taste of this, you know, the old groats, you know, porter or something, and they sample everything a little bit, and he's always like, oh yes, this reminds me of a marvellous vintage I tried in the summer of '88 in Runcorn. We went to a tavern named the Cock's Whiskers, and the barmaid's name was Helen, and it sort of does that all the way through. And then at the very end, they get lost and they go into the wrong pub. And I still remember the name of the pub because I've used it a few times joking about pubs in my hometown. They take a wrong turn and they go into the wrong boozer and following the camera real ale guide. And the pub they walk into is called the Sailor's Fist. And there's like just a big fist on the pub sign. All the windows are smashed to bits and there's like an unconscious bloke in like a Newcastle shirt outside of it. And they walk in and there's like an absolute meathead behind the bar. And he's like, lager or bitter? And the bloke's like, oh, actually, I must say. And he starts sort of like berating him. And then in the last panel, the bloke's face is all smashed to bits. He's got like a glass hanging out of his face. And he's like, ah, yes, this reminds me of the time I was glassed in a pub in 1992 in the spring in Yorkshire. Yeah, the pub was, the barmaid was called Sarah. And he's got a glass hanging out of his face. But, yeah, you just know this bloke would be an absolute throbber, don't you? All the same. British European. I stand with Ukraine. Yeah. And naked contempt for working class people that talk with an accent. I hate them. What a penis. What a wanker. I think I'd rather go for a pint with Bill Cosby than this fucking bloke. Cheers, Andy. Cheers, mate. Yeah, what else? Who have I responded to lately? Oh, that was good. Did you see this? You know what? My old fella said this about Wayne Rooney once when he watched a Man U game. Soon as they started losing, they spat the dummies out. Look at this geezer, right? Obviously, he's lucky enough to have been blessed with natural strength and stamina. And so, obviously, he loved smashing people. And as soon as he went up against someone who was actually better than him, he spat his dummy out. Look at this geezer.
Remember back.
Okay, yeah, come on.
The American athlete flagrantly violated the rules and launched a sudden attack. His misconduct disappointed his opponent. However, he not only refused to apologize but also took off his competition uniform to provoke, attempting to turn the wrestling match into a brawl. His name is Kamal Bey. He possesses top-notch skills and extraordinary talent.
Look at life when he's throwing everyone else about.
But in this match, he not only tarnished his own reputation and that of the sport but also disgraced his entire country. After the match started, Kamal Bey was continuously scored on by the Russian wrestler. He got furious and even provoked on purpose. Then the American decided to resort to dirty tactics. He used all kinds of underhanded moves, repeatedly ramming his head into his opponent. But the Russian showed incredible resilience and didn't give in easily. This infuriated Kamal Bey, who threw those dirty swings at the Russian. This time, the referee didn't let him off. A red card was shown, and he was sent off, receiving the deserved punishment.
What a wanker. What a wanker. It shows the state of affairs these days, isn't it? Because you end up looking out for, you end up preferring the Russians to your own. This is how bad it's got. Like Putin, obviously, I'm not saying I prefer him, like as a man. Don't, polonium poisoning people and stuff, but honestly, is there a cigarette paper between them? Like, I'm being serious. If David Lammy and Vladimir were drowning in the pond and you only had time to save one of them, who would you help? Who would you help? I think I'd be like a bad bouncer. I'd pretend I hadn't seen anything. I'd just walk off. It's shocking, isn't it? Because the traitors. I think David Lammy hates my country more than Vlad does. Because at least Vladimir is probably quite on the fence about Britain, isn't he? He probably just doesn't care either way about us because we're nothing to do with him. We're a tiny little pointless island. But David actually hates my country. He spends all of his time advocating policies that will make you poorer and make your life worse and dragging down everything the UK has ever stood for. That whole deal with the Chagos Island is emblematic of what I'm talking about. Like, that is purposely weakening the United Kingdom for some ideology that wants to tear us down. Why would we give an enemy... I remember that one. No, you know what? It's so, you can tell that I grew up reading the Viz. I've read every one about 50 times. That episode of Roger Melly is where he realises that you can get more popular if you come out as gay, right? Because obviously he was ahead of his time. So he tells Tom, his mate, he's like, I'm gonna sell it to them. And Tom says, listen, you can't do that. You're going to offend all these people. And he goes, no, trust me, I'm a professional. So when he gets up at the awards ceremony at this like gay rights thing, he's on the stage and he's like, I want everyone to know I've been living a lie. He's like, I've been terribly dishonest with all of you. And he starts tearing up and that. And Tom's watching in the audience and he's like, hey, you know what? I was doubtful of Roger there, but I must admit he's selling it quite well here. And he's like, oh, I've been dishonest to you all and I've been living a lie. And I think it's finally time for me to come out. And all the gay blokes are like, tearing up watching him. And then he goes, I'm a shit stabber. And then you just see them all go, like, look outraged. And then in the last panel, it's brilliantly set up. The panels, you can only see Tom, you can see the back of Roger's head. And he he said, I did warn you, Roger. I did tell you that it was probably going to go wrong. And Roger Melly's like, yeah, to be fair, though. And then obviously the last panel, you can see his face and his head's just malleted. And he's like, to be fair, he had a fucking good right hook for a shirt lifter. I laugh thinking about them. I've actually got about 20 of the hardbacks. One of my most prized possessions. I left most of my clothes and footwear and family heirlooms at my brother's house in England, but I did ship all 20 of my Viz hardback annuals out to America with me. And there's one on our coffee table downstairs. The Americans are, it's like a thing in their houses. They always put like a bit of reading material on the coffee table downstairs. Ours has got like a Beatles book that's my missus and a Viz book, which is mine. Anyway, yeah, back to Lammy. He's just outright came out and said, like, I'm Caribbean. We demand reparations. We demand reparations. We want... He drags our country down and he gives our overseas territories away to the enemy, and he wants us to pay for the privilege. So, yeah, that's that. The man's a traitor. Brilliant. That's a brilliant one as well. Absolutely class. Do you remember the punchline to that one? Anyway, I'll stop going on about Viz. It's boring, but that's a good one. Anyway, we'll end on this, shall we? Matthew Stadlen. Is anyone sick of Matthew Stadlen? The fat ginger. I put it on here, look. You can read it. Hang on, blow it up. There absolutely should not be a blasphemy law. This is that talking out of both sides of your mouth, both positions at the same time, gibberish, gobbledygook, bollocks that these people spew constantly these days. Where he's literally spent years essentially saying we should definitely crush anybody who says anything bad about Alan's lads, right? Definitely do it. It's a great idea. And then the second it becomes like an international headline because the British government is stomping on the windpipes of normal people for trying to live free. I made a video about it today. There's that if anyone hasn't seen it. Now they want to sit on both sides of the fence. That's what Jonathan Pye's doing. That's what Owen Jones is going to do. Every single one of them has ran defence for the regulars at Allen's for the last 20 years. Every single one of them. But now, for at least 12 hours, because it's a big story, weasels like this ginger growler are going to come out and say, oh, no, definitely shouldn't have this. You've advocated for them. You've advocated for them for 20 years. Fatty. That's what you've done. There absolutely should not be a blasphemy law, whatever the religion in question. But that doesn't mean inciting hatred is lawful, because it's not. Inciting hatred. How is burning a book inciting hatred? How? If I burn a copy of Ulysses, am I inciting hatred against what? Irish philosophers? Stream of consciousness novels that, frankly, I could only get halfway through? What is that? You're entitled to burn a book. If you bought the book, it's yours. Set it on fire. It's ludicrous that this is even a bloody conversation. These people are completely deranged. If you own the book, set it on fire. You're not inciting people to do anything other than drive the temperature up in the living room or burn their own books. Christ on a bike. It's so obvious. So as I wrote there, at this point, I will concede that fat ginger wokists cause me much more annoyance than imams. So, yeah, I'll give you that, Matthew. I'll give you that. This is what I've said to like people that are like genuine, the minuscule, tiny fraction, minuscule number of people that are actually genuinely racist in 2025. I've told them, I'm all about ideology. I prefer a black bloke in a MAGA hat who takes the time out of his day to go to meet Trump at the White House and has been running a website called Blacks for Trump. I've got 100 times more in common with him than Matthew Stadlen. People like Matthew Stadlen and Owen Jones serve as a bulwark against racism, not because of the things they say, but because they're so inherently detestable. Detestable. I'd rather hang out with Mayar Tusi, who's an Iranian, than Matthew Stadlen, who's a fat ginger Englishman. So well done, Matthew. He's doing his own. He's doing his own. He's doing his own bit for the cause, isn't he? Because I hate these people. And Owen Jones. There's another one. Steve Boyd's depressed. Cheer me up, you're in the wrong place today, mate. There's a few. You could go back and watch the bit about Polish conscripts getting shoveled into the meat grinder by German generals. That's quite funny. If it happens, it's funny because it couldn't be thick enough to let it happen. If you've got a fully functioning brain, that's never going to happen. Anyway, Mayar's now a Persian, is he? Is Persian better than Iranian? Anyway, so we'll call it there, shall we? I'm going to do something useful with my day and try and enjoy myself, and I'm going to go and have a drink with a load of my colleagues. So, ladies and gents, thanks for tuning in. I'm not about tomorrow. That's why I've streamed today. Going to pick my missus up and spend some quality time with the lucky bitch. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to like and share today's video if you can be asked. Thanks, as usual, for all of the super chats and the continuing support. Thanks always to Kate and Rags for moderating. And have a fantastic weekend. Have a drink, enjoy yourselves, pretend it's not happening, at least lose yourself in drink for 12 hours and pretend we're not living in a dystopian hellhole, because we are. And I'll see you all next week, all right? Have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Toodle pip. Cheers.